From Washington to Moscow, New York to Paris, Rome to Jerusalem, the prophecies of the Bible are being fulfilled. Stand by for J.R. Church and today's Prophecy in the News.
This may be it. This may be the one we've been waiting for and looking for according to the prophecies of the Bible. Israel is moving into Lebanon. According to the Jewish press, Israel planning massive attack in response to terrorist raids. The article says here that Israel issues a strong warning to Syria and Lebanon for allowing Hezbollah to attack Israeli settlements. According to the Jerusalem Post, July 17th edition, Rabin warns, we won't tolerate attacks in the north. The article says here, Israel believes Syria can be held accountable for recent attacks because Ahmed Jabril, whose Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, claimed responsibility for Thursday's attack, in which, by the way, 5 IDF soldiers were killed and 8 were wounded. He goes on to say that his organization is based in Damascus, and because Damascus permits Hezbollah to use overland routes to obtain weaponry. Damascus may soon get its due. The doom of Damascus is described in Isaiah chapter 17, which says, the burden of Damascus, behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city, and it shall be a ruinous heap. Have we arrived at that time in history? Is prophecy about to be fulfilled? Gary Stearman is here to discuss with me the doom of Damascus.
J.R., it looks like a very large war. You know, the second verse of Isaiah 17 says, the cities of Aroer are forsaken. They shall be for flocks. The idea is a generalized destruction. The cities of Aroer implies the plains, the region of the plains that lie just to the south of Damascus, down toward Amman, Jordan. And what this seems to be talking about is a rather large-scale, massive destruction that levels not just Damascus, but perhaps some of the areas in northern Jordan as well. And people have been saying, when can this happen? As you read this, this prophecy, the one thing that your mind wants to know right away, is there anything else in the Bible that seems to relate to Isaiah 17? Can we link it together with any other passage of prophetic scripture?
Well, I think we can. We've got a number of chapters here in Isaiah that seem to deal with events when the day of the Lord is at hand. Isaiah begins in chapter 13 with the burden of Babylon, the, shall we say, the Iraqi war. When a great multitude came, tumultuous noise of kingdoms of nations gathered together. They come from a far country. And he says in verse 6, how ye, for the day of the Lord is at hand. And I think perhaps we saw this fulfilled in Operation Desert Storm. Following that, of course, there are chapters concerning Lucifer, how thou art fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning, in chapter 14 of Isaiah, referring to the possibility, I think, of the passage in Revelation where Satan is thrown out of heaven in his battle with Michael. And then we see the Palestina neutralized. Rejoice not thou whole Palestina. And it goes on to say that Palestina art dissolved, the whole Palestina art dissolved. And chapter 15 deals with the burden of Moab. Chapter 18 deals with Ethiopia, bringing a present to Israel, possibly the Ark of the Covenant. So when we get to chapter 17, couched right in the middle of all of this, I would say, yes, I think we are there. The day of the Lord is at hand. We are about to see the burden of Damascus, the doom of Damascus, which will be followed by Isaiah 17, verse 12. Woe to the multitude of many people which make a noise like the noise of the seas, and the rushing of nations that make a rushing like the rushing of mighty waters. The nations shall rush like the rushing of many waters, but God shall rebuke them, and they shall flee far off. I think, Gary, this is the Russian invasion of Israel.
J.R., you realize that if we're saying that this is the big one we're seeing in the papers right now, you realize what you're saying there. That
Well,
things are going to go downhill in a hurry.
We don't know the future.
Yeah.
We don't know what lies ahead. But from all indications, this is a war against Syria. The problem with the Hezbollah in Lebanon, the difficulties that Israel is facing with the Katyusha rockets coming into Kiryat Shmona, and the killing of the Israeli people. Finally now we have the latest, I think, of the Israel pulling back and giving the civilians in Lebanon time to flee. Tell us about that.
On July 25th, 1993, Sunday, this war started, and I think it's probably safe to call it a war because Israel has expanded it and has warned Syria to watch out, stay back.
Shall we link it to the 9th of Av?
Well, I was about to say, I'm holding here a New York Times dated Tuesday, July 27, 1993, the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av, which is the low point in the Israeli festival calendar. It's a fast that commemorates the destruction of both temples. It also commemorates many terrible happenings, wars, etc., in the history of Israel.
In fact, it is said by the rabbis hundreds of years ago that God told Israel, because the 12 spies came back from the promised land. You remember when Joshua and Caleb said, we can go in, and the other 10 spies says, no, we can't, there are giants in the land. And that occurred on the 9th of Av, as I understand it. According to the rabbis, God was angry and said, I'm going to let you stay in the wilderness for another 40 years. I'm going to let you stay, that is, for a total of 40 years in the wilderness, because you rejected the message of the spies, that the 2 spies, that we can go in. And that occurred on the 9th of Av, and it is said that God said at that time, some rabbis, I guess, have speculated, I don't know where they have this proof, though it would be extra biblical, but the rabbis say that God said to them, I'm going to make this date infamous in your history.
And so it remains. And the headline, the New York Times on Tisha B'Av 1993 is, Israel intensifies raids in Lebanon, Galilee under fire. Israeli forces, I'm reading here, stepped up their bombing strikes, artillery barrages, and gunboat attacks today against targets in southern Lebanon. But the Israelis failed to halt pro-Iranian militiamen from unleashing more rocket attacks on Israeli settlements. And the fighting forced civilians on both sides of the border to flee or seek safety in bunkers. Now, Katyusha rockets by the hundreds have been falling on northern Israel, particularly on Kiryat Shmona, beautiful village, agricultural village in northern Israel. And
now you would think, you know, that the Hezbollah would want Israel to relinquish land that once belonged to the Palestinians and to make peace. You would think that would be their ultimate goal, so that while these peace talks are going on, they should sit back and wait and see if maybe something good develops. But oh no, they don't want the peace talks to succeed. They want to drive the Jew into the Mediterranean. That's basically their plan and purpose.
It's their stated goal. I'm reading in the July 29th, the Thursday, July 29th Daily Oklahoman, Lebanese flee Israeli pounding is the headline. Dateline Sidon, Lebanon. Tens of thousands of civilians streamed north toward Beirut on Wednesday, leaving behind ghost towns and villages in southern Lebanon under a relentless pounding by Israeli jets, warships, and cannons. Lebanese casualties have climbed to 88 dead and 382 wounded since the assaults began Sunday, police said. Now, this is interesting, JR, and this ends the quote. Israeli leaders said that peace would return to the southern border region only when Lebanon's government and its Syrian backers reined in Shiite, Muslim, and Palestinian guerrillas. End quote, the Daily Oklahoman. So you see, the Israelis say now that who's behind this is Syria.
In our August edition, 1993 newspaper, Prophecy in the News, Gary has written an article here, a front-page article, Israel is being forced into a false peace treaty. Gary, give us the gist of what you've written here.
The gist of this is that the United States State Department, headed by Warren Christopher, has attempted to bring together the threads, the loose threads of the Madrid peace process, as it's come to be called, under a deal in which land would be returned to Palestine from Judea and Samaria, so that the Palestinians could have their own territorial rule on this land, and it would be called the new state of Palestine. And this is the Christopher Clinton, shall we say, plan. And Yitzhak Rabin was going along with this because the Israelis desperately want peace, willing even to give up territories that were gained.
Right in the middle of their heartland.
Right in the middle of their heartland. And this peace is being resisted internally by several groups of settlers who have literally armed themselves. Here on the front cover of our Prophecy in the News, we have a picture of a young family of settlers who the father is holding a rifle and a young child. The mother has a little toddler. And these people are prepared to fight the Palestinians, Hezbollah, and even the Israeli government itself to avoid being evicted from the land that they feel they won at the price of their blood. Now, it's under this situation, under this, the terms of this so-called peace treaty, that Israel finds itself now under siege from outside. And so I would say that Christopher's peace plan, which I would call a false peace treaty if it's ever brought to pass, I think that peace plan is in danger of total collapse now.
Yeah. About to be shot down.
Shot down, indeed.
Well, the exciting thing about this is that the prophecies in the Bible indicate that Israel must face Damascus. That somewhere toward the end of time, just before the second coming of Jesus Christ, or what the Jews call the coming of their Messiah, there must be a war with Damascus, in which the city of Damascus will be destroyed. There are some who have even suggested a possible nuclear blast destroying the city of Damascus, because it says that it shall be a ruinous heap. Now, Israel's going after Damascus is not really the big picture. That's only the fuse that lights the bomb, if we can put it that way. Because when we get down to verses 12 and 13, we find the battle, I feel, the battle of Gog and Magog. I think that Ezekiel chapter 38 is about to transpire, and it fits so beautifully with the prophecies that we have found in the Psalms.
By the way, while you're turning to that, let me quickly interject verse 3 of Isaiah 17, which I think we need to add here. It says, "The fortress also shall cease from Ephraim, and the kingdom from Damascus, and the remnant of Syria. They shall be as the glory of the children of Israel, saith the Lord of hosts." Now, what we have here, obviously, is the result of a war in which Israel suffers some hurt, some harm, and Damascus is totally destroyed. It says here, it says, "The fortress also shall cease." In other words, Damascus will have no more military power. And it's interesting that in the battle that Ezekiel describes, Syria is missing.
Yeah, the fact here that the fortress shall cease from Ephraim sounds like the military of Israel is fortified in the north, because Ephraim's territory is in the north.
Absolutely.
And that Israel is going to win this battle, but Israel is facing another hurricane of flood proportions coming immediately on the heels of this destruction of Damascus. We have in Psalm 93 the metaphor, "The floods have lifted up, O Lord, the floods have lifted up their voice, the floods lift up their waves." And we, by the way, have seen a lot of floods from all over the world. Half of Bangladesh is underwater. Nepal, a Himalayan kingdom, is underwater. 2,100 people have been killed as a result of the floods in China, in India, Nepal, Bangladesh. In fact, in China, the nightly news has coined a new term for the flood warnings, the black rain, they've called it.
Wow.
And we see floods in the United States as well. But still, Those floods, by the way, I think are a fulfillment of Psalm 93. Without a doubt, Psalm 93 is right on target, but there's a bigger picture here. These floods are also a metaphor for war. And so I think we see all these rain floods, the water floods around the world. God is saying to us, these are just a picture of what's coming. The big battle of Gog and Magog is just around the corner. When we get to Psalm 94, listen to this. O Lord God, to whom vengeance belongeth, O God, to whom vengeance belongeth, show thyself. Lift up thyself, thou judge of the earth. Render a reward to the proud. Lord, how long shall the wicked triumph? How long shall they utter hard and speak hard things? And all the workers of iniquity boast themselves. They break in pieces thy people, O Lord, and afflict thine heritage. They slay the widow and the stranger and murder the fatherless. We've got a big war in Psalm 94.
Indeed, and you know, if this occurs in the north of Israel, that is, if the battle in the north of Israel and the south of Lebanon continues to expand, Ephraim could well be afflicted, that is, northern Israel, the territory there. And here we have in Psalm 94, they break in pieces thy people. It looks as though Israel may suffer some harm.
Yes.
And in fact, that seems to be part of the major idea presented in Psalm 94.
Part of the theme. The fascinating thing about this, Gary, is that Psalm 94 doesn't have to wait till January 1 of 1994 to commence, because the Jewish New Year commences about 3 months earlier than our calendar. And so coming up September 16th with Rosh Hashanah, New Year's Day in the Jewish calendar, we are moving into Psalm 94 quickly now.
Indeed we are, and it looks tough for Israel. Again, it's with sadness that I have to say this, but you know, we have a verse which we've discussed here before we went on the air, verse 18 of Psalm 94. In fact, I'm going to start in verse 17. Unless the Lord had been my help, my soul had almost dwelt in silence. When I said, my foot slippeth, thy mercies, O Lord, held me up. Now this slipping of the foot is not just a tossed off phrase. It has meaning.
That's
in
right.
fact, it is loaded with meaning, J.R.
Absolutely. And this is one reason why we think that the time has arrived for this major war that Israel is going to be involved with, and especially when we see the Jewish press saying Israel planning massive attacks. Let's go back to 1938 in Psalm 38 to see this foot slipping. Just before World War II, when Hitler had launched his tirade against the Jews, there was a special night when Jewish shops were burned. The glass in the fronts were broken. In fact, it became historically known as Crystal Night because of all the broken glass. And this was a venting of hatred against the Jews. And this eventually led, of course, to the Holocaust and the killing of 6 million Jews. 6 million. Can you imagine such a thing? A third of the world's Jewish population. Read to us, Gary, from Psalm 38 about this Israel's foot slipping.
Psalm 38. This is a very, very tough time in the history of Israel. And Psalm 38, 16 says, For I said, hear me, lest otherwise they should rejoice over me. When my foot slippeth, they magnify themselves against me.
Yeah.
Now, who are they magnifying themselves against Israel? At this time, it would be
The Germans.
the Germans.
Yeah, or the Nazis, actually.
Yeah.
Now, you know, let's go back to Psalm 18.
Oh,
Because in Psalm 17, we have the taking of Jerusalem. Keep me as the apple of thy eye, hide me under the shadow of thy wings, like as a lion that is greedy of his prey. That's in Psalm 17, descriptive of Allenby and the British Army who took Jerusalem under the Balfour Declaration, which stated that Palestine shall become the homeland of the Jews. And then in Psalm 18, which we feel that is indicative of 1918 and the bringing to a conclusion World War I, halted in 1918. And we have this beautiful statement of Israel in Psalm 18.
Psalm 18, verse 36. And this is a metaphor of God's protection for Israel. Psalm 18:36, Thou hast enlarged my steps under me, that my feet did not slip. Now this is a song of redemption. Basically, it is a song of triumph, and the feet are firmly planted. So now we know what this means, this idea of feet slipping.
Here Israel says, You've steadied my feet that they don't slip. In other words, Israel has been made to appear strong in the eyes of the world. In Psalm 38, we have Israel's foot slipping. In Psalm 73, we have Israel's foot slipping again. And that would bring us to the Yom Kippur War of 1973. Listen to verse 2. But as for me, my feet were almost gone. My steps had well nigh slipped. Wow.
And you know that's what happened in 1973. There was a horrible sneak attack during Yom Kippur, the highest of the high holy days. The enemy said Israel will be sleeping and we'll get them. They launched a war without any warning whatsoever, and it looked as though Israel was all but dead and gone. And then Israel, through, I believe, a miraculous redemption, deliverance, stood up, started fighting back, and when Israel then turned the tide and looked like she was winning, the United Nations said, hold it, peace conference time, stop, ceasefire, everybody stop right where you are.
Yeah, that's right. In the Song of Moses, Deuteronomy chapter 32, famous verse, verse 35, to me belongeth vengeance. It sounds like 94:1, doesn't it? Psalm 94:1.
Sure does.
And recompense. Their foot shall slide in due time, referring to Israel's difficulties with war, the big battle of Gog and Magog. For the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things that shall come upon them make haste. For the Lord shall judge his people, and repent himself for his servants, when he seeth that their power is gone, and there is none shut up or left. In other words, God is going to judge Israel this one last time. It looks like this is the last judgment. We're moving into this last judgment of Israel. And their foot is going to slide. This is a metaphor for doing badly in a battle.
It looks as though they're almost wounded to the death, but then something happens.
Yes. So Psalm 94, with the foot slipping in verse 18, appears to be the beginning of this. But immediately God comes to their aid and help, and they will win the battle of Gog and Magog. More about this on our next program. We'll be back in just a moment.
On today's political globe, there's a heightening sense of drama. In Russia, Europe, and the Middle East, the eyes of the world watch as the tension builds. To help you understand today's news from a prophetic point of view, Prophecy in the News publishes a monthly newspaper. Now, you'll enjoy reading our latest news coverage and well-researched articles on Bible prophecy. Order an introductory subscription today just by calling 1-800-475-1111. When the operator answers, ask for your introductory subscription to Prophecy in the News. We'll mail you the next 6 issues absolutely free. Call 1-800-475-1111. Now that's toll free. Or write to Prophecy in the News, P.O. Box 7000, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, 73153. Please call or write today. Again, that address is Prophecy in the News, P.O. Box 7000, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, 73153.
We're back. Psalm 94 appears to be the big psalm of the battle of Gog and Magog. Concerning the floods of Psalm 93, 800 or so years ago, the rabbis wrote that this third flood is future and it represents the battle of Gog and Magog. Has that flood begun. We have seen the floods lifting up their waves. The Hamas organization has been bombing, for example, the World Trade Center, and tried to kill our President Bush on his trip to Kuwait. It looks like the Psalms are right on target.
You know, we wrote in the July prophecy in the news that Syria gives aid, comfort, and solace to 12 different terrorist groups. We named them in the newspaper. Among those, Hezbollah and Hamas. They're all funded by Iran, which, by the way, seems to have an endless supply of money and arms. Mostly they are ex-Soviet arms. And Iran is channeling support to Syria. Syria is the little front or the puppet by which all this is being fomented. And JR, in the next few days, we are going to look to see whether Hafez Assad blinks. It's up to him now. What's he going to do? Will he retaliate? Will he draw back?
Well, the United States is gearing down its military. And the Clinton administration is putting us on the slide as far as our military preparedness is concerned. Israel is going to face this war alone. Israel has launched the war. I think Israel will get mired down in this war, and by the time we get to September 16th, I think we're going to probably hear Israel saying, "Oh Lord, to whom vengeance belongeth, show thyself." Could happen.
It could very well happen. You know, I have to throw in a quick positive note here as we draw to our final minute or so. Right after the description of the foot slipping, Israel's foot slipping in Psalm 94, we have this phrase in the 22nd verse, "But the Lord is my defense, and my God is the rock of my refuge. He shall bring upon them their own iniquity. He shall cut off their own wickedness. Yea, the Lord our God shall cut them off."
Indeed. It's fantastic, isn't it?
You know, that takes us back
Israel's going to win this war. I mean, it's going to look bad for Israel for a while, but God's coming to their rescue.
Indeed. This takes us back to the Song of Moses, this rock, the Lord as the rock of defense. Moses prophesied of that in the closing chapters of Deuteronomy.
Yes, he did. God is still in control of the situation, and it will look like Israel having to fight this war alone, and the United Nations withdraws support. In fact, according to Isaiah 17, the glory of Jacob shall be made thin. Israel is going to be, according to the news media, the bad guy in this situation. But God's on Israel's side, and Israel will win.
Amen.
On our next program, we'll continue this study. This is J.R. Church and Gary Stearman. Until next time, keep looking up.